event, and so delighted to welcome Karen van Godtsenhoven today. So it's the first of many events, we hope, in the centre that will extend the rich conversations around fashion curation that is our specialist subject, not only how it's practiced, but how it's taught, studied, and spoken about. So we welcome these conversations hugely. Karen has had, as a lot of you know, an extraordinary career already in this specialist discipline, significantly at Modemuseum in Antwerp, during a period of huge explicit experimentation within this field, and later on at the Met, working with Andrew Bolton's team in the Costume Institute, and also as an academic, and amongst many projects recently enrolled as a PhD student. So the links between research and practice is something that I'll be asking Karen about in the second half of this session. But before that, I'm delighted to say that she'll speak about her current project as guest co-curator of the Met's current Women Dressing Women that builds on her ongoing research. So we'll be thinking about the continuities between this extraordinary project and other research preoccupations later on. So Karen will speak now for about half an hour, 40 minutes, something like that. We're informal here. And I'll start some questions, and then I'll open it up to the floor, so you'll get an opportunity to ask as specific or as broad a question as you like. So this is really something that matters to us hugely, about opening up the language around exhibition making and curatorial practice. So I couldn't be happier than to give Karen the floor.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Judith. I would like to thank everyone for coming here today to this lunch talk, but especially, of course, I would like to thank Judith and Amy's invitation, and as well as Bree's support with the organization. I would also like to acknowledge Judith's inspiring work in fashion curation, which for me personally showed that you can bridge research and theoretical critical thinking with more widely accessible exhibition concepts. I would also like to acknowledge the work of fashion scholars such as Caroline Evans, Valerie Steele, and Elizabeth Wilson, who have been of enormous importance for my own research and development as a curator. Finally, I would also like to thank my colleagues at the Costume Institute at the Metropolitan Museum, especially curator in charge Andrew Bolton, my co-curator Melissa Huber, and Amanda Garfinkel from the curatorial team, as well as Joyce Fung, who was incredibly instrumental in actually dressing the exhibition, because I think, as we also acknowledge in the catalog, not enough attention goes to the people and the skill that it takes to actually dress fashion exhibitions. But that's for another talk. Just a very little context for this show. We sort of started ideating it or developing it in 2019, originally meant to be shown in 2020. In America, 2020 was the 100 years centennial of women's suffrage, so it was sort of a celebratory event, and also sort of looking at the time, there were 3 women. There were a lot of press articles. There were 3 women in haute couture houses in Paris, so it was a lot of sort of positive news just before, of course, the pandemic happened. And a lot of things in the meantime have changed in the world at large, but also in terms of women at the head of fashion houses. As you I'm sure you're aware of. So that sort of changed the sort of timeliness of the show, which went from a more celebratory pursuit to a more maybe critical opportunity to rethink the history and roles of women in fashion. So we started sort of in a historiographical way, thinking of the anonymous dressmaker, this type of the invisible and anonymous woman dressmaker, and how this stereotype has persisted. Why we speak of the fathers and the masters of haute couture and not of the mothers. At the time, I was working also on my own research into feminist literature, which I'm still continuing for my PhD. And I read about this idea of building female counter-genealogies, which is, as Rosie Braidotti, the scholar, wrote, it's for women to build upon, for women to have a vision of the future, they also need to build upon an existing horizon, and they have to know about the women who came before them. So in that sense, I thought it would be great to develop a sort of lineage of female fashion designers, and it was great to be in an institution that, of course, has incredible collection. So the context for this show was also to look at the museum's collection through this idea of female lineage or female genealogy. Here, as you can see, as the entrance hall to the show, where the stairs where you go right into the Costume Institute, you see sort of the two Olympians that also relate to the institutional history of the Costume Institute. So it's Madame Gray and Gray Kawakubo, who are the two women who have had their own retrospective at the Costume Institute as exhibitions. There is also a nice anecdote that may be famously Rei Kawakubo often says she has no references or inspiration sources, but there is some correspondence from the 1977 Madame Gray show. I think it was 1993, where Rei Kawakubo wrote a little note that she was felt so inspired. Of course, their practices are very different, but I think you can also maybe see how their sort of radical approach to fashion design has made them stand out as the Olympians that have been celebrated in the museum. But so the collection of the museum and the institutional history are sort of the perimeter for the show, because of course the subject could easily command more than 10 or 20 exhibitions, but really here we wanted to look at how women designers have played a role, but also women wearers, women champions, women curators, different types and roles of women with regards to the fashions kept at the Costume Institute, which was also founded by two sisters as a museum of costume art by Irene and Alice Lewison in the 1940s. Then the first the first installation you see when you go down immediately is sort of another celebration of the three stars of Paris interwar haute couture, Madeleine Vionnet, Elsa Schiaparelli, and Gabrielle Chanel, because we wanted to also play with this idea of anonymity and visibility, and sort of this idea always that, you know, Charles Frederick Worth is coined as the master of haute couture, and sort of show here the three women and three personas which were also sort of the greatest of their time, not only in terms of fashion design, but also in terms of creating a business and sort of how they were also sometimes self-mythologizing, as in the case of Chanel, but also how they really became stars in their own way. With regards to the set design for this piece, we also made a reference to the three-way mirror registration photographs that were used by Madeleine Vionnet in the 1920s and 30s. to register her own copyright of the design she made, and this setup obviously made it possible to see the whole front and back side of the design. So it also shows a sort of growing self-consciousness and sort of business acumen of Madeleine Vionnet, because she is always, maybe presented as a sort of seamstress type in her studio, but she was also a very sharp business mind. So this just as a short reference to the ideas for the exhibition design in this case. Then the first part of the exhibition, so the exhibition is divided in 4 parts. The first part, anonymity, is actually just this slideshow that you see here on the right with images, because in the book we have a few 19th century garments referring to that are sort of the antipode of the Charles Frederick Worth dress with the named label. We have some objects in the book that are that represent the 19th century women dressmakers, but in the exhibitions, because of space constraints, we were not able to show these 19th century gowns, but we chose to reflect the idea of anonymity and the anonymous dressmaker through a slideshow of images that range through time from the early 20th century to the atelier also of mid-century designers like Claire McCardell and Gabrielle Chanel. But what we really wanted to underline in this theme is also the collaborative nature of fashion design, because sometimes you see the designer, but often these companies employed up to 2,000 to 3,000 women, and a dress, might have been passed on so many different crafts people and women, and was developed in a great collaborative effort. So this was also sort of one of the main ideas we wanted to show with these archival images of the names or the designers that are present in the show. The second part, which is really the first part in terms of objects, then moves from this anonymity to visibility. So here you see the sort of golden era of female fashion design in Paris. So the interwar years, where more women than ever were at the head of the maisons, and so it was really a time of great visibility of these women, and we wanted to show this in a sort of idea of the pantheon, or a sort of gallery of the greats, or caryatids too, showing how some of them are still, very famous, but some of them have been relatively forgotten. And just as a reference, I'm sure it's quite obvious from the setup, but also here another reference to these amazing logos of the fashion houses. This was also used sort of as the inspiration for the design of the show, because at the height of their visibility and artistry, these women always often worked with the artists of their day, such as Pauli Reeb or Paul Tayat, who developed these incredible logos and also sort of made the whole visibility and the whole idea of the maison tied to a woman's name very visibly in iconography. We tried to think of ways to integrate the logos and also the connections between the houses, because there are so many interesting stories between these women. For example, there is a relationship between Calo-Sur, where Madeleine Vionnet trained, and then later her own mentee, Marcel Chaumont, who's also in the show. So we were thinking, how can we connect these silhouettes to each other? But it proved quite difficult, crisscrossing lines on the floor, but I'll come back to it, how we solved those issues. But we've done a lot of research in how these women sort of interfaced with each other and how they were connected, and how this field of the interwar couture was very, how they were entangled with each other. Here, from left to right, you see Jeanne Paquin, Madame Gray, Jeanne Lanvin, Marcel Chaumont, and Madeleine Madeleine. Here is a small detail also of the Madame Gray piece with a headpiece by Caitlin Keogh, who is a graphic artist, and she also, as you will see throughout the show, sort of made custom headpieces for the mannequins. These mannequins were reused mannequins from the Heavenly Body show in 2018, and it was about fashion in the Catholic imagination. They had these sort of devout facial expressions, and we gave them a finish with sort of a plaster, plaster finish to refer to these to the Greek pantheon. Again, here a great lineup of these women, again with a lot of them, as you can see, a lot of them also had their start in the lingerie business, and here it became sort of a beautiful array of all these pale pinks and browns. Here you have, from left to right, Marie-Louise Labruyère, Louise Boulanger, then the Bouesseurs. In the middle you have Madeleine Vionnet, then the Lucille from London, the Calosseur, and Jeanne Hallé and Marie-Marjane Lacroix. In this lineup, which is to the left when you enter, you have houses like Agnès de Cole, Elsa Schiaparelli, Nina Ricci, Augusta Bernard, and Maggie Roof. And then finally here in the back, on the left, you have the Prémesseurs, which were the original sort of La Garçon designers, and next to them the suit by Gabrielle Chanel. And on that side we have Elisabeth Hawes, who is a great bridge between Paris and America, because she started her career in Paris and then became settled in America. And on the right you have Matt Carpentier. From this visibility of the interwar years in Paris, we move to the idea of agency, the post-war period, and the idea of agency of female designers. The sort of prequel to this theme is here the American women, with in the middle Claire McCardell, because she was the first one who sort of advocated to have her own name on the label of the department stores that she worked for. So she worked for Townley, and she was the first one who got credited, because in this time, in the mid-century, it was a lot of American women were female designers were sort of working for department stores, but also becoming more aware of their own national identity as designers, and sort of liberating themselves from the Parisian influence, and they became more assertive in their own sort of style, which was more versatile and more functional than Parisian couture. And at the same time, they were asserting their own agency in terms of asking for the right credits. So here on the right you have Jessie Franklin Turner. In the middle you have the Future Dress by Claire McCardell, which is also the main image of the show. And on the left here you have Hattie McCarnegie, who actually worked as a sort of who worked with several designers at the same time, but who was sort of an artistic director, heading her own brand. In this group, it's called Liminal Spaces of Fashion. We showed also how a lot of immigrants to the United States, such as Valentina Schlee or Mariska Karas, were starting their own sort of more bohemian boutiques that were spaces where art, the decorative arts and fashion merged. So they were not really in the fashion industry, but more on the periphery, both as, you know, usually coming from an immigration background, but also from other arts. And yet at the same time, they sort of created this environment of where art and fashion merged, and at the same time created their own agency as female designers of decorative arts. In this section, Appropriating Menswear, we explored how tailoring, which is historically gendered as a male profession, was sort of appropriated by female designers, such as Elizabeth Hawes, where you see the uphill trouser suit from 1939, as well as more contemporary examples, such as Anne de Meulemeester and Jill Sander, who both really worked to sort of take items from the masculine wardrobe and tailored garments and reappropriated them for their women's wear collections. As you can see also, the headpieces also refer to this idea of reappropriating tailoring tools and techniques. From there, we move to the boutique generation. In the 1960s, the agency of both women wearers of fashion and women designers improved greatly through the accelerated changes in society. The boutique generation, including designers such as Barbara Hulanicki of Biba, Betsy Johnson, and Diane van Furstenberg, all sort of symbolize this newfound agency of themselves as designers, but also their wearers, and sort of catalyze these changes as not only in the fashions they make, but also the larger changes in the fashion industry. So the move from haute couture to ready-to-wear fashion was all sort of catalyzed in the space of the boutique, which acted as a sort of room of one's own for these designers and their customers, where they could sort of share their experiences in a communal atmosphere. The yellow silhouette here is by Sandra Rhodes, her first collection, The Knitted Circle, which she started after her label she had with Sylvia Ayton. And on the left, you have the striped ensemble by Sonia Riquel, who opened her shop on Paris Left Bank in 1968, right after she divorced her husband, for whose label, Laura, she had been designing for 8 years. We see that also with Diane van Furstenberg, that a lot of these stories of both sort of economic agency go together with a sort of emancipation of their personal agency, and that they translate these ideas through the garments, such as the wrap ensemble from Diane van Furstenberg, which she created in order for women to be able to go from day to night, to go both to their job, to their kids' school pickup, as well as to the nightclub. The second part of the boutique generation is a more, there we focus more on designers who use the boutique to create a more political or subversive environment. Of course, we have for London Vivienne Westwood, who had a succession of boutiques that were very transgressive, but also Katharina Hamenet, whose Stay Alive in '85 t-shirt dress was linked to the peace protest here in London at Greenham Common. The black cold shoulder dress is by Donna Karan, and she made it, I mean, in the early 1990s. She made editorials with the model wearing it supposedly to be, as the first female president of the United States. And because she said she was sort of against the shoulder pads that were trying to make women look more or have more armor. So she said, I will show the shoulder as a sort of gracious element of the female body. And it was dubbed the cold shoulder dress by the press and was later worn by Hillary Clinton. In the back, you also have Vivian Tam, who's an American designer with a Hong Kong background, and she created this sort of black and white Chairman Mao dress, which sort of made a statement about Mao's legacy, both in good and bad ways, because she was basically, her parents fled to the United States when he rose to power. The following theme focuses on bodily agency and how women designers have sort of used concepts of effect and prosthetics to sort of merge the body and the garment. We have the work by Georgina Godley, whose Lumps and Bumps dress from the late 1980s was sort of already exploring how to go away from the idealized female archetypes. And of course, the Body Meets Dress, Dress Meets Body collection from Rei Kawakubo takes this even further. Again, we have Vivienne Westwood with her padded derriere silhouettes from the iconic On Liberty collection. Again, sort of exaggerating the female form and in a way deconstructing the ideal shape. We have more contemporary examples by Melissa Baumeister, as well as the body parts collection by Anne de Meulemeester. We saw that these sort of the previous section, or these designers sort of paved the way for thinking differently about the body, the body's silhouette, but also how the body interacts with the garment and its material sort of synergies, and how these were sort of paving the way for more contemporary designers who also use, who sort of add to the bodily agency of the wearer by making space for previously sort of censored notions of sex and reproduction. So here you see from the left, you have the kangaroo pouch dress by Isabel Toledo, which might not be so visible here, but it's a very beautiful drape that creates a pocket on the sort of kangaroo pocket on the front of the dress and has a sort of volume on the abdomen. Next to her is a silhouette by Simone Rocha, which incorporates a nursing bra, sort of a maternity idea into the silhouette. Then we have a dress for going out by Jasmine Samso, who's a Danish designer who is making special collections for people with achondroplasia. This is also quite a recent development and recent acquisition for the Metz collection, because until recently there were no special fashion collections for people with achondroplasia, and they were usually had to wear either custom-made or children's garments, and the designer really tried to create something that is adaptable, that has drawstrings, and that can also go from day to night. Similar ideas in the kangaroo dress, the sleeping bag dress by Norma Kamali, which has a lot of different, the parachute dress, which has a lot of different drawstrings that you can adapt the length of the skirt, and sort of gives the agency to the wearer in order how to customize the volumes of the skirt. On the total left, you see a garment by Nocesso, which is a duo of two transgender designers who sort of create again adaptable garments that can be worn by all genders and body types, and that allow the wearer to show and reveal or hide different parts of the body. This last theme or sub-theme in the agency section focuses on empowerment through practice and looks at more contemporary examples of how contemporary designers work in a more collaborative ethos, often work community-based, as well as have more a more sustainable mindset. People like Maureen Sayre, who works with mostly dead stock fabrics, and whose symbol or brand logo of the moon is sort of symbolic of a more intercultural dialogue. Then we have a special customized mannequin based on the model Erin Rose Phillips' body, which was a collaboration specifically for this exhibition. We were very glad to be able to add this to the permanent collection also, because everything, there was about 80 silhouettes in the show, and 50%, so 40 silhouettes, have never been shown, but there's also been 10 new acquisitions. So this was a new acquisition from the designer Colina Strada. But the garment, she makes it inclusive of her friends, wear a lot of different body types, and so this is a sort of bodysuit which can fit one of our more standard mannequins, or this custom-made mannequin of Erin Rose Phillips. Then we have a collaborative silhouette by Maria Grazia Churi together with Grace Wales Bonner, incorporating Bonner's own background as a British, Jamaican, and Caribbean designer into the new look bar silhouette. Another example here of a collaboration between a big brand with a more local community is Gabriella Hurst's quilting jacket made together with the Gee's Bend community in Alabama, where the original sort of Gee's Bend quilters were based, and who are now really sort of credited and also paid for every piece they create together with Gabriella Hurst for Chloe. Then Jamie Okuma, who is a Native American designer who takes a very slow approach to fashion, who only sort of creates custom pieces, and also sometimes she says she worked on this 5 years ago and then didn't find the right way to finish the dress, and then she only returns to it whenever she feels it's ready, so it can be 5 years later, sort of really incarnating a slow approach to fashion. And finally, Jiali Teng, a Malaysian-born American designer who works with ideas of the fold, the sari, and the kimono in her no-waste approach. Again, just a short sort of focus on these mannequins, on this mannequin as a sort of special commission for the project. We feel that in general the conversation around inclusion and diversity with regards to mannequins is only quite recent in the field. I talked to some representatives of mannequin companies and asked them for many other options, but they don't really exist yet. I mean, they're starting to, there's a little bit of new options, but not really. It's still very limited. But I would say, in the last three to 4 years, it's been getting better. So I actually really hope that that they will pick up on this, and that in a few years there might be a bigger range, because it's still, especially also in the context of New York and the United States, there's a very big focus on representation, and people sort of expect to see, which is a good thing, they're asking to have more diversity in terms of mannequins, and this is, I think, something we grapple with a bit in our field, that also in terms of museum collections, that usually, standard sizes are collected, and like the rest of the industry, everything is based on a standard body type, so it's difficult to have true diversity. But I do think that as with catwalks and editorial images, it's possible to have these changes, especially now also with new techniques of 3D printing, different body shapes. And I just hope that the coming years will see a plethora of new options from the commercial mannequin brands. Then, as you might remember from the first theme of visibility, when I said that there were a lot of, these are just some of my initial notes that I was making about these linked fashion houses, and how mentor and mentees sort of relationships worked between these women-led design houses and the interconnections. There's actually many more, but this is just a snapshot of my ongoing research. But so this was hard to find a way to materialize in the exhibition design. So here you also see a snapshot of ongoing research in the Paris City Archive, where I went to look at the actual starting dates of and also to check if the houses were founded in their own name, or sometimes it was in their brothers or their husbands or another family member, because it wasn't always possible for women to be the full owner of their own business at the time. But so here you see how we solved this in the exhibition. Also in the book we have this fold-out sort of genealogy, where you see all the different links. So you have mergers, you have mentor-mentee relationships, you have mergers, or the opposite basically. But really what we wanted also for students, and I mean this is an ongoing, we were sometimes hesitant to really print it in the book, because every week you can find new information if you keep digging through the archives. So also there's always new news in terms of more contemporary fashion houses and the designers' rotations. So it's really, but what we really wanted to show was just how entangled these women's careers were, and that we hope in a way that it might inspire further research. The last theme looked at notions of absence and omission of the fashion canon or the fashion history, and we sort of chose to represent this through juxtapositions, always of two silhouettes, as you can see here on the right-hand side. So we use this idea of the two-way mirror, where you see on one side the reflection of the silhouette in front of it, and then if you walk around, you see through like glass. So you have one view that reflects your view, and the other one that sees through. Sort of also symbolizing how these designers or their creations went from being invisible to visible. The first example here is a juxtaposition of a Fortuny Delphos gown and a contemporary dress by Esther Manas. Both of them were sort of husband and wife design houses, but of course the Fortuny Delphos gown is a very important fashion history icon, and was only recently sort of discovered in the Fortuny Museum that because of various reasons of urgency, that he patented it in his own name instead of his wife, Henriette Negrin. So from now on, also in the Fortuny Museum, they are crediting both of them, at least for this design. And then we showed it together with this ruched dress for sort of plus-size body types that is made by Esther Manas, who is a Belgian fashion designer based in Paris. And there it is more, I mean, the notion of absence here is more about the plus-size body type that she wants to normalize as part of the sort of high fashion lexicon. Here you see a few different duos. For example, in the back there is a dress by American designer Zelda Wynne Valdez for the performer Joyce Bryant, which is no longer extant. So in that case, we used the image of the performer in the dress. So there is no extant garment. There is also the dress by Anne Lowe, who's an African American designer who has been recently who's been more widely recognized for her work in the mid-century, and as well as her creation of Jackie Kennedy's wedding dress. She has been there is an exhibition on her work at the Winterthur Museum, but she's been long absent from the canon because of racial segregation in the mid-century. And on this side you have Miuccia Prada and Schiaparelli. Both of them maybe not so absent from the canon, but with both of them use materials that are not typically linked to fashion. And in Schiaparelli's case, there's also the issue of not so many remaining garments in museum collections, but this was sort of helped by the donation or acquisition from the Brooklyn Museum collection that merged with the Met's collection, and that then turned into the exhibition Impossible Conversations, Miuccia Prada and Elsa Schiaparelli in 2014. There in the back you also see Phoebe Philo's Yves Klein collection for Celine, which sort of reappropriated this sort of giant of post-war painting, and because he often talked about using women as human paintbrushes, so she sort of reappropriates these women's bodies by using them in a dress graphic. Here you see a pairing of two women who are at the helm, or were, in Sarah Burton's case, of a design house that was founded by a male designer, or that carries the name of the original designer. So in this case, Alexander McQueen and Christian Dior. Both of these silhouettes are sort of come from their from the women's early collections for the brand. So they sort of act as a statement of these women's positioning at the houses. So in terms of Maria Grazia for Dior, she had these fencing silhouettes that she used in her first collection, because she said for fencing you need the mind and the heart, which is something women need when they are working in fashion. And with Sarah Burton's collection, you obviously see this her own aesthetic that is still has this sort of armature feel, but is also imbued with more organic shapes and shells related to sea imagery, which is sort of a staple of the house. But also you see that her aesthetic is more organic. Then in these, here you have Hanifa Mwemba, who is a American designer of Congolese descent, who felt that, who testifies that only that she wasn't really accepted into the fashion industry, but only when she sort of stopped trying to fit in and started to make things that she really, that had to do with her own history and with Congo's history. And when she no longer tried to be accepted by the fashion establishment, then she had a sort of breakthrough. So that was also sort of a symbolic exercise, because here this dress is inspired by the Congolese flag, and she presented it during COVID when her show was one of the more successful ones, where you had these, it's now called, what we now call the digital fashion shows without live models, but she had a great digital animation of the dress, and that became sort of a viral hit in the United States. So it was also some sort of how a notion of absence or not belonging to the mainstream can also sometimes become a positive feature. And then, of course, the absence of the typical dressmaking methods and tools in the 3D printed skeleton dress by Iris van Herpen. Here are some reference images from a show in the 1970s by Stella Bloom and Diana Vreeland. It was called The 10s, 20s and 30s Inventive Paris Clothes. This was a reference for us in terms of the circular imagery and symbolism in the set design, as well as the reflective surfaces which were used, especially here in this Vionnet section. And here are some examples of Dan Graham's pavilions, which we also were inspired by for the development of this two-way mirror. Dan Graham says about his pavilions that they are for people, to look at themselves and to be looked at, but also to see how they are looked upon by others. And this was used also by Phoebe Philo for her Celine runway show in 2017. So it was always one way where you would see through, and the other one that was reflective. But we used it again to underline these notions of becoming visible, opacity, transparency, and self-reflection and sort of mirroring. Here is another example of a reference that we used. It is a still from a video or from a performance by Anne-Theresa Keersmaker for Rosas. It's the phase performance where the dancers, it's sort of this minimal dance phases that always have, it's called 4 movements to the music of Steve Reich. So they always very slightly and gradually change their moves, and you can really follow it in the shadows of the dance. So it's very beautiful when they finally meet, as in this image. And this was also some sort of idea that we wanted to highlight, also the invisible makers behind the garments. And even though we were not always literally showing them, we showed them in these in the slideshow. We also use it in the catalog photography to symbolize with these shadows, the invisible makers behind every garment on show. So here, for example, you see an example of the catalog photography where we use this effect more, to more impact and also sort of underline this notion of stepping into the light or becoming visible of the anonymous dressmaker figure. That brings us to the end of the run-through. Thank you. know how we are for.
Thank you so
for time.
much. I haven't been worrying about the time, to be honest. We've got a little bit of time. We've got 20 minutes or so, of which I will take up a few, and then I'll open it up to the room. I mean, there are lots of questions, obviously, that you've raised. Thank you so much for this tour, and just insight into your thoughts. The incredibly effective theming of it, and also the kind of impossibility of theming. The impossibility of creating something without kind of blurred edges, and the way that you deal with the blurred edges in lots of different ways and different circumstances, both in terms of, inside and outside the system, but also the impossibility of someone existing as a kind of solitary creative person within the industry. And all of that has just raised so many things. But in the spirit of that, what I wanted to ask you is how that works in relation to your own work. Because I feel there's always a kind of fil rouge that comes with you into the project and leaves with you. In the spirit of this, that in the spirit of projects never beginning and never ending. And I know that you've worked on projects that look so carefully at the body, like shapeshifters, like your work on kimono, and your interest in the kimono, both as abstraction and liberation and kind of aesthetic inspiration, that you use the history of dress in a very particular way. And I just wondered whether you could tell us a little bit more about your own practice in relation to where your preoccupations found their way into this project that actually predate this by quite a long time.
Thank you. Yes, it's a long story, but I'll try to synthesize it. Indeed, I worked on various shows. I would say in that sense that indeed the body. Also thinking, of course, of Joe Entwistle's work, but this idea of how fashion designers approach the body, their methodologies. So not just what it looks like, but also their own artistic approaches, the sort of intuitive draping versus tailoring methods and others have always been of interest to me. Also looking at how schools of thought or approaches versus autodidactic approaches have shaped fashion design, or in that show Game Changers, of how big changes that we think come out of nowhere have come through a lot of the time through methodologies of designers that have been gradually introduced. And I think so that it's just an interest of me, and of course how it changes the wearers. The body and as well as lives and their embodied experience, I think, is very rewarding, and a way of looking at fashion history, or for example a very encyclopedic collection like Costume Institute, where all the greats are represented. I think it's interesting to see or to look at these issues and see how you can still sort of create new ways of looking at them. How indeed the kimono, has influenced Madeleine Vionnet. I talked to you before. We're still sort of working on that idea through an upcoming project I'm working on, where Madeleine Vionnet is sort of positioned as the mother of fashion designer, but really because of her approach to the body and dress that came from the kimono. So it's true that there is this underlying current of ideas that always seems to come through, but I hope not in a repetitive way. But it's indeed very, for me, I was working on this idea of genealogies, which was also inspired by your work, Judith, and of course, I mean, if you look at the canon of fashion history, I felt that there was still, strangely enough, still a lot of work to do with regards to those sort of historiographical exercises.
I mean, I feel it's not repetitive in any way. I mean, I think that we benefit hugely from going back and back into things, because I think otherwise the risk in this, in a way, small, certainly growing discipline, there's a temptation, because there's such a broad kind of uncharted territory, to kind of move on too quickly, almost, and so to forget about close reading some of the material that inevitably comes up, the day before. You open, or something, you always discover something just when it's too late to print it or to edit your essay.
That's why it was so hard to really say this is the version of this genealogy we use, because for the video we use in the show, we keep editing it basically, because it's moving and we can still do it, but in the book it's hard to...
and I think that's to its credit. I mean, it shows the kind of aliveness, and the aliveness of a subject that is so big and so kind of contested, and that is changing in front of your eyes. And I wonder whether, I mean, one thing I really wanted to kind of make sure we talked about today, we've got a growing dynamic PhD community here, and we're encouraging practice-based PhDs, and we're grappling with that because of the idea that an exhibition is too popular or popularized in a way to count as a PhD. So you have to reflect upon it in order for it to become a kind of academic piece of work. Can you talk about the relationship between your academic practice and your curatorial practice, and where there's an overlap? Because I think certainly for this room it's something that that we're looking for models for how to put research and practice in relation to fashion curation together. And so while we've got you here, if you could give us your account of that experience.
Thank you. Yes, it's a great question, because indeed, I mean, I come in a way from practice, and now I'm only sort of starting the PhD trajectory, which mostly the other way around for most people. And I still feel in the art history department, whereas I felt that in museums we're already more respected in the sort of, in the academic world or in the art history department. It's still another, for exhibitions to count as research, or like fashion exhibitions is still, we're not there yet. I don't know. I always think it's better here in the UK, but in the mainland Europe, it's still quite rare. But the consciousness is growing. But I think that for me, especially here at the Met, it was a great opportunity and challenge, because the institution is so research focused, but at the same time, as you know, fashion holds a special place at the Met, and also needs to bring in a lot of foot traffic, as they say. So it was like a balancing act between thorough research and still trying to create a narrative and a story that is in a way accessible and and that has a large reach for the audience. And I mean, I hope we've succeeded it. And it was also great to work with Melissa, who's really incredible. She has incredible knowledge of all these French fashion houses and all the women's lives and just a great fountain of knowledge. But so as I said, I was more doing a lot of feminist and conceptual literature, and in the beginning when we talked, it was clear that I also had to look for a way, like, how am I going to bring all these ideas into a format that is, I mean, you know, it's for the American and worldwide audience. It cannot be too academic. It has to be clear. And I think, in a way, the delay, because normally we had under a year to develop it, but I think that in a way, in retrospect, I'm happy, not happy, of course, about all the consequences of the pandemic, but I'm grateful that we had 3 years' time to really make sure that, like you said, it was so hard to decide on the themes and on the organization, because, as you know, the space is not very big, and to sort of claim that you're going to do, you know, women designers is in such a small room in a way. But I do feel that because of the time and the research we were able to do, that we were able to bridge deep research with a practice or an audience focused, where it's not just the curator, you know, but we hope to sort of invite further research and further dialogue with press and other, you know, audience members. And I mean, it's also something in our field. I think, you know, many people, we often have to work under very short deadlines, and I do feel in this case that the extra time has helped. Yeah.
And in terms of your own research and your own research into kind of feminist histories and theories, is there one reference that you would recommend we put on our essential list? Is there something that you feel that was useful to you? It doesn't have to be, you know, the one and only, but often there's a book that, you know, we sort of, that somehow becomes almost talismanic in relation to a project. Is there one that you might recommend the audience reads?
Well, for me, it was this book, Nomadic Subjects, by Rosie Braidotti, who's a partner also of Anneke Semmelik, who's a fashion theorist. And in this case, she talked about this importance of feminist counter genealogies and of sort of institutionalizing, you know, a feminist perspective. But of course, it's not fashion. I mean, it's not fashion related. In our field, I also referred obviously to the work of Ilya Parkins from Canada and Joe Entwistle. Yeah. But I mean, I do feel there is still, these are, I mean, they're not, you know, I think there is still a lot of potential there.
Yeah. I mean, I think we often encourage our students to, in a way, work backwards, as in find books that they love and then make them relevant, rather than Googling, you know, fashion curation. Because if you Google fashion curation, you know, the textbooks don't emerge necessarily. So it's more about something. And I mean, I agree. I think just the idea of counter genealogy is a great one, you know, that you sort of hang on to a concept that makes sense for the project, and then somehow you fit things into it, not as a strict template, but as something that is kind of useful to research, because I think we all find editing so difficult, you know, because with the kind of onslaught of material, you know, it's often a way of kind of binding things together. Now, I'm slightly aware that I might be hogging this, so I wonder whether, I know Ben and Bree have roaming mics. If someone has a question for Karen, please don't hesitate to ask it. I know there's a session in here in a little while, so we'll be thrown out before long. But if you have a couple of questions, we'll take them.
So I had a question on just how you came about going. That's differentiating the agency, the anonymity, and then specifically looking at anonymity. God bless, and the obfuscation / obscuring of voices. Because there's crossover in all of those, of course. And so it's like, can you walk us through how you chose examples and how you
Yes.
placed them within
Yes.
those narratives?
Yes, this is again something, I mean, I come from, also from Antwerp, where we looked at things very conceptually. And at the Met, there is also this encyclopedic impulse. So there is more this chronological. So this was good, because also with Melissa, we had a lot of conversations. Yes, how are we going to marry these approaches? And indeed, I feel like, from anonymity to visibility to agency, it's sort of loosely chronological. You have this, the anonymous dressmaker, the visible interwar, and then the agency. And then, of course, with intersectional conversations about race, gender, social class, all these things that are, I feel, sometimes, are not saying they're further along in America, but since we were also working on this, over Black Lives Matter and all of the Trump fallout, all this stuff was very, in our minds also when we were working on this. And then we thought, okay, the museum's collection has certain strengths, but also, there's also a lot of gaps and omissions, and how are we going to address them? Because we know they are there, but museums, I would say, until recently have often skirted around them. So now we thought, okay, we're just going to be sort of open, like, some of the objects aren't extant, some haven't been collected, some haven't been credited. And then it's also indeed not being vulnerable, but opening yourself to like new research, new points of view. And so we said, okay, we're going to add this part about omission, but as you say, there are no real boundary. It's sort of all entangled, yes. But also for the audience experience, we needed 4 teams, but it's, as you see also in the design, you sort of walk through it. It's not like you have very strict boundaries. Thank you. Yeah.
It's going to take a while.
Thank you so much for your talk. I just want to ask about these 4 parts of the exhibition and about the titles of the parts. Did you have any other suggestions in terms of the titles of the parts? Because when you were talking now about like anonymity, then visibility, then agency, for me it's like a growing trend in terms of the strength of the words. And like the 4th part was kind of surprising for me, like the title itself. So, and I just wonder, did you have any other suggestions in terms of the titles of the parts? And probably, do you have any, I don't know, different ideas about these titles? No?
So, do you mean for the 4th section or for all of them?
For all of them, yeah.
Oh, right. So it's about the titles of the sections.
Yeah, of the sections.
Yeah. I would have to look up we had so many, but as I said, it's a sort of a compromise between your own, what you think is most appropriate and what is most clear for the audience. And of course, as I said in the beginning, collaboration and communion was sort of an underlying, but that was not specific to one. I mean, those were ideas that sort of run through the whole show. Also notions of absence that run through the whole show. We had a lot of, I mean, for each section we had different words, but I wouldn't be able to, I would have to check my notebooks, but I don't know if you have a certain, if there's something you were thinking of, or that you feel that it's...
Like the title of the fourth section was a little bit surprising for me myself, so that's why I was asking.
And what surprised you about it?
Yeah.
It's because you were saying that in your question, when you were asking your question, you were saying that the first three grew in strength.
Yeah, they're like in terms of
So
the
there was
words.
a kind of incremental agency.
Yeah, and then for me, like the fourth part was a little bit down, not in terms of the value of the words itself, but in terms of the strength of the word.
Yes, it's true that it went from dark to light to sort of more powerful, and then omission is also because it's about institutional. I mean, because it's about the collection of the Costume Institute and about what's been delivered through fashion history and the canon. So we wanted to say, look, this is what we have, but there's also a lot of omissions and things to reflect on. There's in the catalog also great this essay by Elizabeth Way, who's a curator from FIT, which really focuses on omission in terms of racial, of black design, mostly African American designers. So there it's a more clear focus. But in the exhibition, we opened it up to different types of omission.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you.
It's true. It's a difficult. It's like a blind spot, isn't it? It's like how to describe a blind spot, and then how to stage making visible something. I mean, it's a kind of the contradictions in it make it such an interesting thing to try to exhibit and to show both things at once. Are there any more questions? Yes.
I was just wondering if you could expand a bit more on the choices you made or throughout looking at the exhibition, the sort of the link to the Greek pantheon and also the idea of the goddess and like this ethereal feminine ties in. It seems to sort of tie into it. So I was wondering if you could talk more if that was about those choices.
So about the reference, for those who haven't heard, it's the reference to the pantheon and a kind of ethereal femininity as a reference to the exhibition. It was one section mainly, wasn't it?
Yes.
Just about those references.
It was just more in terms of this balance between, because they were working in the interwar period, so you have this modernism and also ideas of classical, as in the work of Madame Gray, you have this work of classical antiquity that comes back. But more than really the work of the designers, we wanted to, because we wanted to show them as a version of the pantheon, because this is more this idea of counter genealogies of women that have usually been just not been in the halls of the greats. So we just use this as a more in terms of set design as a reference to the idea of the caryatids or the pantheon.
I'm afraid we're going to have to call it a day because this room is booked in a couple of minutes, so we're going to be assaulted. I'd like to obviously take this opportunity to thank Karen and hope she'll come back soon and speak to us about your research and your PhD.
Thank you, Judith.
Thank you so much.
Thanks everyone.